Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always by my co-host Nick Filato. First of all, I apologize for the audio. I don't have my microphone set up. I am visiting a friend in Chicago. And by the way, Chicago summers, they are everything everyone said they would be. Like, we're just hanging out outside before this, drinking, eating, and it's actually like nice and 79 and breeze. It's like sunny but nice out. You don't feel hot and horrible the whole time, Nick. But let's not steal the show with my nonsense out here. Nick Filato, just coming back from training camp, Giants training camp, your first ever as a credentialed member of the media. You had been before as a fan. So before we get into practice today, and there's a lot to talk about in practice, just to give you guys a heads up, I think it's going to be our best recap yet. I want to get into the explosive opportunity this offense had, because that's the name of the game for the Giants in 2024. Can they create explosive plays on offense? And I want to get into some of the second and third team guys that stood out, moving up the depth charts, some positive progress from Brian Burns, everything about Malik Nabers, Daniel Jones, the rest of this receiver core, everything that went down in practice. But before that, Nick, I want to get into your experience. So I want to ask you a few questions about it, Nick. I want to start by just saying, generally speaking, how was it? Like, was it fun? Was it cool? Was it everything you expected? Was it not what you expected? What was the situation?
It was a cool situation, Dan. I got to meet a lot of the guys on the beat: Dan Duggan, Pat Leonard, Jordan Raanan, Art Stapleton, people I've been following and reading their work for years. So it was nice to just chop it up with them. Yeah, they all knew me. Most of them. I'm not sure if Paul Schwartz did. Schwartz was like, "Did your face look like the one on Twitter?" And I was like, "Ah, no, I got this shit stash right now, man." And he was like, "Yeah, maybe not." And I don't know if he's on Twitter too often, but
Pat Leonard knew you?
Yeah, at least he acted like he did. I'm not 100% certain if he does, but he acted like he did. And you know what? I respect that. You know, it's a nice thing to do. It was cool to see the behind the scenes of what actually happens during these press conferences with Coach Dable. After practice, we got to talk with Allen Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, Devin Singletary, and a couple of the other players requested by the Giants media. It was just really dope to see how all that went. And then I was just on the sidelines taking a bunch of notes the entire time, taking a bunch of videos. I put videos up on Twitter, and then I realized some of the videos I shot, it's a little bit of a faux pas to be putting them up on Twitter. I don't believe they want like the motions and the shifts and some of the things that I included in a lot of my videos initially while I was on the practice field, uploading them onto Twitter. Being my first time, I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. I ended up taking some of those down. So I apologize if I never got back to any of the listeners of this show who asked me questions on those specific plays that I uploaded.
No, you're going to have to share with me the raw files after this chat. They view it as a competitive advantage. They don't want to give away that kind of information, the pre-snap motions, things of that nature. I feel like even, some of the videos I've seen that have been allowed, they don't show you everything. We'll get into some of that today. That's why it's really valuable to just be there and see it and with your own two eyes. What was it like? So tell me how did your day start? Walk me through the start of your day and walk through the whole thing.
All right, I park in this parking lot. Ed Valentine comes walking up to me. Yes, yeah. Ed Valentine comes up to me, and it's my first time meeting Ed. I've been working for Ed for about 5 years. This is my first time because I was out on the West Coast for so long. First time actually getting to meet him, and he was cool. He gives off this curmudgeon-y type of vibe, much more gregarious in person. He's making jokes with other people's on the beat and everything, and I'm like, yo, Ed, you're kind of a dude, man. You're kind of a cool guy. So it was really great to get to chop it up with Ed as well. And then I go into a little room. I get this little nook, this little corner. I set up my laptop and we go out and we basically listen to Brian Dable after bullshitting for like 15, 20 minutes. Brian Dable gives his spiel. You guys can all watch that on YouTube. And then from there, we walk out to the practice field and we sit up right in front of the fans by the end zones, whichever end zone you want to be at. We stayed in the near end zone because there was more action towards the near end zone. Watched a bunch of individual drills initially, watched them stretch. Bunch of special teams period mixed throughout practice, but you had, I think, 4 team periods, one of them being a 2-minute drill. There were no individual matchups, though. So this was a little bit of a lighter day from that standpoint. So we didn't get the cornerbacks versus the wide receivers. You don't really get the defensive line versus the offensive line like it's the Senior Bowl, but you didn't get those matchups that really garner a lot of attention on social media. So we didn't get that, but we got a lot of team periods and a lot of interesting content to go over, some valuable stuff as well. And there's some young guys on this roster too, who I don't know a ton about, who I'm like, this could be, the steady drumbeat could start going right now for guys like Dante Turbo Miller, who had 2 touchdowns, one being a deep wheel route that he caught against Darius Lewis. How you see this in second team. And now I'm going to be paying attention to the next couple days. Will he earn any first-team reps? Because the running back position, if we look at that specifically, we have Devin Singletary is the de facto number 1, but then you also have Tyrone Tracy and Eric Gray working into that. So if Miller, just kind of going off on a tangent about him, if he can work into that, that's something that I want to pay attention to over the next coming days, because that would be positive momentum for him possibly making this roster. So little things like that you're paying attention to. Like already I can glean, and anybody can glean if you just read the practice reports, that Ryder Anderson is a much bigger deal than maybe a lot of people originally anticipated, because he's been working with the first team defense. He's been starting next to Raheem Nunez-Roches and Dexter Lawrence on the first team and coming in and out. So that's really great for a player like that. But I was paying attention to the rotations, the players who were off on the side as well. Tyler Nubin had a calf thing, so he was off on the side with Theo Johnson, who was doing some light sprints, moving well. Jalen Mills was also moving well out there. Stanley Thomas Oliver, I believe his name, was over there with Aaron Robinson. No sight of Evan Neal. But I was just kind of soaking in all of that at the practice. And then afterwards, we talked with all of the players that I mentioned previously. John Runyon was the player who addressed the entire media on the stand. And then there were a couple guys off to the side. Jalen Hyatt, I approached him at the end of his time. I kind of caught him towards the tail end of him speaking. At the end, he was kind of pounding everybody that was around, and I was around. So he looked at me. So I stuck my hand out, and he has a little mustache, right? He's trying to grow it out. Like, he's about 10 years younger than me, right? So he's trying to grow it out. So I looked at him. I'm like, hey, rock it, bud. And he just goes, I got you. And we dabbed it up and we walked away. It was a pretty funny moment.
I got news for you, buddy. He's about 15 years younger than you. We're getting old.
Really?
Yeah, probably 14, 15 years.
I was thinking he was like 23.
I think 21, 22, I think, for Jalen Hyatt, but I could be wrong. But I thought he came out young in the draft, but I could be wrong.
Trying to make me sound old. Let's see.
We are old. What are you talking about? We're not making you sound anything. This is what
he's 22. So
yeah. All right, 10 ain't 10 anymore. All right, we got to call space these days. But that sounds a great experience, because I remember it similar to how mine was when I went during an OBJ 2016 OBJ training camp, and OBJ was the star of that show in training camp. He was dancing around, signing things. OBJ fans are screaming at him. And it was Ben McAdoo. It was a really relaxed, laid-back practice. I felt like it was not great, if I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't get to see a lot of team periods. I went to maybe 2 or 3 of them, I think. And I just didn't get a great vibe. What was the vibe you got from this, from the practice? Was an intense vibe? Was it a good team feel vibe? What was kind of the vibes you were getting?
So I wouldn't say it was an intense. I think the team periods were relatively intense, but there's no actual hitting, right? But if we think back to last year, it seemed like Joe Shane and Brian Dable were very tentative with putting certain players out there, and it was more so, we just want to get to the finish line of training camp and then roll into the season. But they didn't really appear ready once they got to that finish line and the season started. As we all saw, they got beat 40-0 against the Dallas Cowboys. I don't necessarily think it's like that this year. They were managing certain players' reps, Deontay Banks, John Michael Schmitz. They didn't play a full complement of snaps, Andrew Thomas, but I'm fine with that. And they worked in those specific players' backups to give them first team reps. But guys are actually practicing, and they are kind of going hard. There was an energy to it that I respect. It wasn't just laissez-faire or lackadaisical like we've seen in the past, like you probably saw during Ben McAdoo. I'm pretty sure he had that kind of reputation of having lighter practices. I wouldn't say it was the most rigorous practice. The previous practices were probably a little bit more up-tempo, but still, there were 14 periods and a 2-minute drill. So there's something to that. Red zone drills as well. Not too many of them, but they were operating in the red zone. Dane Belton had that impressive interception of Daniel Jones to end practice. And that's just Dane Belton's bag at this point. And I love that about Dane Belton, because Dane Belton, look, he's earning first team reps right now. Tyler Nubin is off on the side. Brian Dable before practice said it's not a big deal what's going on with Tyler Nubin, but it's calf tightness. So they want to be precautionary and just give him the ability to heal that up. Dane Belton gets inserted in the starting lineup, interception to end practice, right? So little things like that I also appreciate when players who are given opportunities to prove themselves actually rise to the occasion and prove themselves, even if it is just in training camp practice.
Yeah, no doubt about that. There's a lot to unpack there, and we're going to touch on all of it. I will say this for those listening. Nick does a training camp practice, or at least today did a training camp practice report on BigBlueView that I've read the entirety of. I'm just going to be blunt and say this, to be completely honest, because I spent my whole life as a Giant fan. Before I even covered this team for 24/7 Sports starting in 2016, I would be a rabid fan. I was you, the listener. And I've read a lot of practice reports. Just going to be honest, you should go check it out for yourself, and then you can tell me if you agree with it. None really compare to this. I would say the big blue interactive ones, when Cy is at camp, those are the only ones that compare. They're as detailed as that. And I will give a shout out. Giant Insider gets some good nuggets in there, but still not quite what this is. And I'm just going to be blunt about it. No offense to the rest of the beats or anybody else doing this. As far as written practice reports, you're not going to find the detail like you're going to find in this report. So you can find that on BigBlueView. Quick shout out to them, obviously, and Ed, your boss. But we're going to touch on each of those things. But where I wanted to start today, this is a Dan Schneider picnic. is explosive plays and explosive opportunities for this offense. I think at this point in time, for me, it doesn't have to be for you, Nick, or for the listeners, but for me, the way this team turns around the fastest is if they can start cashing in on some of their explosive play opportunities in the regular season. And by some, I mean a lot. It has to start coming in bunches for the Giants. When they have an opportunity to make an explosive play, they need to connect on it. They need to create that explosive play and need to let games change in their entirety by those explosive plays happening. There are multiple factors that need to go into play for this explosive play to happen: the O-line, the quarterback, the receiver, or the running back, depending on the play. But I want to get into each of the explosive opportunities they had today in team periods, and we went over this before the pod. There were 4 that we went over, and I want to go over with you what happened on each play. So let's start with the best one. Let's start with the one that worked. I think there was one that was connected on, and the other 3 were misses. The first one that worked during a 2-minute drill, the Daniel Jones deep pass to Malik Nabers. And I've seen video on 3 of these. I didn't see video on the Bellinger play. But on the Jones deep ball to Nabers, I want you to first walk me through from your vantage point and everything you know after practice, what you saw in the play, what you thought about the play. Give me what you saw from the quarterback. Give me what you saw from the receiver and the D-back. Then after that, we'll get into the quote from Nabers after practice, because that was a great quote.
Yeah, the quote from Nabers, that's going to illuminate a lot of what I'm about to say. But I just saw another team period start up. This happened to be 2-minute drill, so I was unaware of that before 2-minute drill took place, but I was able to ascertain that's exactly what it was after the completion. But Malik Nabers is on the far side of the field, and I just see one-on-one against Deonte Banks. Now, Deonte Banks, through much of the practice, he hadn't done all that much. He was off on the side, and it was Cordell Flott, Nick McLeod, and Andrew Phillips running first-team defense. Now, in the very beginning of practice, though, Malik Nabers and Deonte Banks ended up going up against each other. This was more in the red zone. I don't know exactly what yard line it was, but it was in a more condensed version of the field. It might have been like the 25 or it might have been the 20. Malik Nabers gained a little bit of vertical leverage on Deonte Banks, and Daniel Jones threw the ball a little bit behind, and Deonte Banks ended up breaking it up, and it was a PBU. So now we get the second matchup on a vertical route against Deonte Banks and Malik Nabers a little bit later on in this 2-minute drill. And Malik Nabers got a step on him, beat him. I believe it was to the outside, and is running up the sideline. Daniel Jones put a perfect pass with touch over Deonte Banks to the outside shoulder of Malik Nabers, who tracked it in, secured it through the catch point, through the ground, everything. So that was beautiful. And that one might have been like a 40-yard pass. We could see more of that, which we have seen from Daniel Jones. Not nearly enough, but we have seen him be like, okay, confirmed, middle of the field close. I'm going to look that safety off, hit my back foot, and then fire the football. And it was something similar to that from what I can remember, right? I don't have the play in front of me, but it was a beautiful pass and a beautiful catch by Nabers. And it wasn't terrible coverage by Banks. Like, look, I've heard iron sharpens iron at least 5 or 6 times today. I heard Allen Robinson say it. I heard John Runyon say it. I heard, I think, a coach say it as well. Nabers and Banks, this is going to be so much fun, dude. These are 2 young guys who have the potential to be among the top 5 at their position. Like, we always say that about Nabers. I think Banks does too, right? Like,
I'm not so sure about in my mind if I'm there yet with Banks.
For me, potential does not mean you're going to actualize.
No, I know.
Potential means you have the coverage ability. You have a feel for the position. You have the athletic ability. He has the eyes right now for a young type of neophyte player to at least show that, hey, we built him up as a man coverage guy. He actually had a lot of good zone plays in his rookie season. There are a lot of good cornerbacks like Patrick Surtain, Sauce Gardner. Those guys are different, but
that I think is a different tier for me. But I think Nabers is in that tier of receivers from a talent standpoint.
That's yes. Yeah. But my point on Banks is, if Banks takes a step forward, which he could, he could be in that conversation, because I think he has at least the requisite athletic ability and skill set, but it's just not consistent enough. So if he can refine it out and be a little bit more consistent, which that happens in the first, second, third year of players' development, then he could at least be in that conversation. But my point is, him against Nick, that's iron sharpens iron, right? Like Runyon or any of these offensive linemen against Dexter Lawrence. That's whatever those offensive linemen are against very, very, very tough iron, right? Like very, very sharp iron, because Dexter Lawrence is such a stud. We saw it today as well with Burns and Andrew Thomas, right? And we're going to get into the one Wandale deep ball that was missed, where that was iron sharpens iron, right? So I'm just excited that there are at least complementary, highly skilled players on each side of the football, that it's not just Nabers just killing Cordell Flott, every play. There's at least a level of competency on each side of the football to where the best players at a certain position can grow with each other. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to enter a parallel universe or go through some elaborate labyrinth just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. It's easy to switch to. The website has a good interface. I have a couple buddies who have recommended this to me. They speak highly of Mint Mobile. Get started. Go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That is 3 Bs. There you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. Plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That's mintmobile.com/BBB. 3 Bs, triple B. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/BBB. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment, and before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE system.
Without a doubt. And just to corroborate what you're saying, Nick, Deonte Banks was one of the most athletic corners in the combine. And Deonte Banks had flashes both in his rookie season, which we can show you on film. We already put it on our YouTube page from last year. Go check it out, or one of Nick or I's Twitter page. We tweet out game film there as well. And from his Maryland tape as well, the game against Marvin Harrison Jr., where he's flashed that level that you're talking about. So he's flashed that level and has the athleticism. To me, it's more of just a consistent thing right now. It's just so much more consistent at the Nabers level. So I'm a little skeptical that he gets to that level, but
I'm very skeptical that he gets to that level, but I think there's at least a potential for it to happen. Yeah,
you're right that it's possible. Now, from my vantage point, that play, perfectly thrown ball by Daniel Jones, his best throw I've seen in camp. Great route by Malik Nabers. Great coverage by Deonte Banks. Watch that play again. Banks is right there with him, and that's Malik Nabers. Look at just go back and look at some Malik Nabers LSU tape. See how many corners at the collegiate level can actually hang with him when he's running those vert routes. It's few and far in between. And then what you said is great, because look, if he has that one-on-one, which he's going to get sometimes, Nabers, not a lot, but he's going to get sometimes. And who knows if it can be a lot at the beginning of the season before the defenses kind of really know that Nabers is the guy you got to basically double every play. But if he's going to get those one-on-ones, Jones can do what you said. He can diagnose it pre-snap. And it's kind of what made Tyrod Taylor work, just to be even faster for Jones. He has to get to that level that Tyrod was at, where it's clicking his head. And it's just boom, 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 in your drop, look off for a second, bang, hit that on the right side. And trust it, because that's what Nabers said after practice. He's like, Jones came up to him and he's like, we got man, but he's in press man. Do you want to switch out of this something? He's like, no, I'm running that go. He's like, trust it, throw it. I think Nabers just said, throw it up there. And that's what Daniel did. And that's kind of the story of the Giants offense right now and of Daniel Jones's career to this point.
Yeah.
Throw it up there. If there's one quote, and I'll shout out El Jefe for this, because I actually saw this on his Twitter, and he's so right. He said it's the theme for the Giants 2024. I think it's the theme for now and for the past Giants, for Daniel Jones' career so far. Throw it up there. Give him a chance, because I watched a lot of tape last year for Beyond the Box Score of Justin Jefferson when he was in his hot streak, Nick. And a lot of that was just Kirk Cousins trusting it and throwing it up there. And then I watched an interview, a post-game interview after the Bills game that they won. And remember that game, Kirk Cousins kind of had that go route to Jefferson at the end. That he just kind of just fucking threw it up there for him, and Jefferson made the play. And they basically said, it's like, I don't care what the coverage is. I don't give a shit where you're at. I'm throwing it up there for you. You're going to make a play on it. And that's what Jones needs to do, because Malik Nabers will make that play for you more times than not. So throw it up there for him. Let him do what he can do. And obviously on this play, he did what he could do.
Yeah, and you'll love to see it. Now, we'll move on to some of the other not so impressive deep ball opportunities from Daniel Jones. So I have Jones ended up finishing 68 completion percentage.
That's what I respect. Yeah, thank you for charting him. I'm not big on him, but yeah.
Yeah, it was 15 of 22.
Yeah,
but
with
the
no
deep
pads, no pads, yeah.
Exactly. Now, I felt like he operated the quick game. You know, he was fine. Like, he was Daniel Jones. He was efficient with the quick game, get the football out of your hands. I think like one of them may have been a sack. The Wandale play would have certainly been a sack, which we're about to go over. But on these deep passes or these uniquely designed plays that we don't always see from the New York Giants, we'll go over one of those in a little bit as well. It left some to be desired outside, of course, of that 40-yard pass to Nabers that we already went over. And the first one I want to go over is the rollout throwback play.
So I'm just going to give you from the vantage point of what we saw by watching the video that's on Twitter. This is me, the listeners, and everybody. You can tell me what was wrong about this, what you saw, and from your vantage point and how you felt about it. From the video I saw on Twitter, and I think shout out Justin Pennick for sending it, it's a design rollout play. Nabers has his guy completely beat. The ball needs to be thrown ahead of him toward the pylon, where Josh Allen puts it, where Mahomes puts it, where Burrow puts it. Instead, it's hung up there in the air. Nabers has to come to a complete stop, turns for it, it's behind him, it goes through his hands. Now people are saying, I saw on Twitter, it was very funny. Somebody replied immediately like, look, the ball goes through his hands. Like, yeah, dude, the ball goes through his hands, but you're forcing him to completely stop momentum on a guy he has burned by two. I said on Twitter, Nick, that's not college open. I mean, that's not NFL open. That's college open. Malik Nabers is college open on that design play. He has multiple steps in the corner. If he has to stop his momentum, turn back, stop, and try to catch a ball behind him like this, and it goes through his hands, you know me with these. I don't call those drops. I call those horrible throws. Like, to me, like, it is what it is. Not on Jones. It's if any quarterback made that throw, Mahomes, Burrow, Rodgers, I would personally view that as a bad throw. The ball needs to be ahead of the receiver so he can just kind of walk under it for an easy catch. If it's not that, and it's all the other stuff, when the guy has 2 steps on the DB, it's just hard for me to blame it on a receiver. That's just where I'm going to be at forever, no matter who the quarterback is.
Now, of course, that's the quarterback. And this is the unique play that I was just mentioning, because this wasn't just a rollout and like Jones rolled out to the numbers. First off, love the fact that he is able to roll out and do that right now, just like 8-9 months removed from a torn ACL. So he rolls out to his right, so his throwing way to the numbers, and initially on the line of scrimmage, aligned to the right is Malik Nabers, who ran a deep crossing route, putting him on the left side of the field. So this is a play where you get the defense to shift to their left, meaning the offense is right, and you have Nabers running across the formation in man coverage, just leaving someone in the dust, and typically there's no one else there. And that's exactly what happens. So Jones rolls to his right, sets up, looks back to the left side of the field. Nabers is wide open. Nabers has like 12 yards to the sideline, plenty of room. And Jones just did not put enough air under the football. He underthrew it. But these are the types of plays that you run in training camp to see how well your offense can execute it. And I'm sure that Dable and Kafka, they're going to call this play again in training camp to see if Daniel Jones can make those throws, because you can have a bad throw, right? And that's what it was. It was a bad throw. I think Jones has the arm talent to make that throw.
That's the question that I come into with this, because you're going to set up that play. And I said in my tweet, because I watched the video, in my opinion, that is a tough throw, Nick, that I don't think a lot of NFL quarterbacks can make. That's my point. So I say this is a tough throw for any NFL quarterback to make it from that spot. And you described it great where that throw is from. But I am not sold that Jones has the arm talent to make that throw or the anticipation to make that throw. And I will say this, when Justin Jefferson's saying we watched the tape on this guy and he has a big guy and he should have a big arm, but he doesn't feel like he has special arm talent, this is where it shows up to me. And this is why when I look at guys like Drake May and Caleb Williams, when I'm scouting guys in the draft and I'm then scouting a guy like JJ McCarthy or these other types of quarterbacks and, the Joe Burrows and Mahomes, that's the difference. Why I want that type of quarterback, because then you can put these plays in your playbook, these design roles for you to go. And maybe Jones does have the arm talent to make that sometimes, Nick, but is it going to happen consistently? Can you trust it in a game? Because like you said, this is not a good sign for them to trust to call this in a game. We know that. They're not going to look at this and be like, we can call this yet.
Yeah, so Jones has the arm talent to do that if he is reaching the 90th percentile of his arm talent. But how consistent does that happen, right? Like, I think Jones is a professional NFL quarterback. He can make that throw. It's just how consistently can he make that throw relative to a lot of other NFL quarterbacks? And I think that's where Daniel Jones struggles a lot of the time. Like, you're telling me from the numbers, he can plant, set, and this all has to happen quick, right? And then deliver a pass. He can do that, but there's a lot of moving parts to that type of play, and you're not going to run it all that often, even in practice. But to your point, you want to have that in your playbook. Arm talent is a very broad term, and we've discussed that plenty on this podcast through the years. I think he has the arm strength to do that, and he has plays on his tape where he has the touch. He just doesn't always put it together, and that's kind of what Daniel Jones is, right? Like, he'll flash certain things, and you're like, oh, wow, that's excellent. I love to see that. But then there are plays like that where it's thrown behind, or the play that we're going to go over in a little bit with the Daniel Bellinger where it's thrown inside and behind. And it's just like, I know you can make these throws, but why aren't we consistently making them to maximize you as a quarterback prospect?
I think a lot
and that's kind of the big issue.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, and I know but I think a lot of it has to do with the throwing motion as well. I just don't think it's like he's more of like I don't know how much of a thrower, a natural thrower he is of the football. I think a lot of it is that shot. It just doesn't always look that natural to me. Sometimes it does, though. Like the Nabers ball was freaking beautiful. The ball he hit in that 2-minute drill. That when he does stuff like that, it's like, damn, he is capable. And I think it goes to the point you're saying, like, he has it in his range of outcomes, but how many, like, where is it at from a percentage standpoint? If you're a coach and you're looking at this, like, how many times can I call this play where I need my quarterback to have a design roll where he's rolling across the field, and he has to throw across his body to the left and lead a receiver toward the sideline? How many times is he actually going to do that? And how many times is it going to look like what we saw today where, it went through the receiver's hands, but that's only because the receiver had to completely stop his momentum after burning the guy by 3-4 steps, turn back to his opposite side and try to catch the thing instead of just running under it easily. And that's the thing. And when I'm looking for guys like the Drake Mays, the Caleb Williams, the Josh Allens, that's what I mean. The guys who effortlessly can just put that thing out there. And it's not like a gamble, like, will he make this throw if we get this call? Because you have to be, like you said, To make that play call, you have to get the perfect look from the defense. You designed it, you set it up with your other plays, and boom, you have all that space out there. You have Malik Nabers running into all that space. And it's like, we hit it as a play caller. As a designer, you're like, we did it. We're not going to get that look. We hit it. But now I need my quarterback to make that shit a lot, man. I need that ball. Or for what I want, for if you want to compete for Super Bowls consistently, the guys who are competing for Super Bowls consistently are making those throws more consistently.
It comes down to trust. It comes down to trust. And can I trust my quarterback to make that throw?
Oh, yes. Right. But I just wonder then, Nick, like, why can a quarterback make that throw sometimes, but not all the time? Is that arm talent? To me, that's arm talent.
Yeah. Well, to your point, if that's the arm talent, then yes, you are correct. And it's just, I can't trust you to do this when the lights are the brightest and when all these moving parts. But having a weapon like Malik Nabers on a play like that, especially, dude,
that open is crazy.
You couldn't think about the 2022 New York Giants offense for a second. The Giants moved the pocket and designed quarterback rollouts so frequently. It was such an efficient and effective part of their offense. Now, if you can incorporate this type of changeup to that,
now you overs off of that. Come on.
Exactly. That could be another touchdown, right? Another 2 touchdowns, another 3 touchdowns on a season.
Right there. That's supposed to be a 50-yard touchdown or whatever it is.
Let me just say, Cordell Flaw, what are you doing? Why are you celebrating that? Like he did the whole thing jump, and I'm like,
crazy to celebrate that. I saw that. What are you doing, dude? You got burned. You just got lucky the throw hung up and was behind the guy, but you got burned. And so just to put a bow on that play, when you guys hear me in off seasons and from the future saying, I really look for elite arm talent, and I think that's the first thing you got to search for. This is the reason why, because I want these plays to be surefire touchdowns or very good chance at touchdowns, because you're not going to get them a lot. We're not going to get to run that play all the time, and when it's there, you have to have the perfect look, which they got. So that one, fine from your vantage point, that totally makes sense. And look, it's a tough. I want to make it clear, it's a very tough throw. I don't blame Joe. I bet half the quarterbacks in the NFL are missing that a lot. But I just am looking for those 5 or 6 that are making that a lot. That's just kind of where my bar is set at the quarterback position, and will always be. I will never apologize for that. Those are the type of quarterbacks I'm trying to get. The third one, the Wan'Dale Robinson deep ball. So I mean, we can talk all we want about the throw. It's obviously a horrific throw. Let's just be honest about it. No offense to Daniel Jones. I would say it's about any quarterback. It looks like he just kind of has a bad, I guess, throwing motion or whatever went into that to make that ball miss that much. Because the guy, Wan'Dale Robinson's, 15 yards, no one near him, and the ball just airmails over him. And it should just be something you could easily just throw out there with touch. Anyone almost, but it's just a weird moment. It's kind of like that to me, Nick, reminds me like when I get the yips in golf. Like there'll be a tee shot where I'm just hitting good all day off the tee. And then randomly I top a ball off the tee and it rolls 10 yards. That was that throw to me when what I saw on film. So you can talk about the throw if you want, because I want to hear your vantage point. But what I want to know, because I didn't see this from the clip that went on Twitter of that Wan'Dale Robinson play, how did Wan'Dale get that open? That's what I want to know. That's the important.
I don't know.
Okay.
So I don't know either. I shot the play on my phone, and I was watching just like the offensive line and Daniel Jones back in the pocket. And it's important to note that Brian Burns beat Andrew Thomas pretty badly on an inside swim move. And I put that up on Twitter, and I didn't take that one down. He showed the bend and everything. And it was beautiful because he was threatening Thomas several plays before that with his speed, and Thomas held up well. Eventually Burns would end up cornering, but it was one of those situations where Andrew Thomas is a good enough tackle to where he could probably shove Burns outside of the pocket, allow the quarterback maybe to step up. But Burns was able to fake that first step up the arc, open Thomas up a little bit too much, which you don't see often from Thomas. And then Burns went to the inside. So it would have been an easy sack nonetheless. But
Burns, Thomas, you got to love that, Nick.
Oh, yeah, dude. I absolutely love
and the fact that who's winning against Andrew Thomas, a healthy Andrew Thomas, besides if you're winning against a healthy Andrew Thomas, good job. I don't care how you did
it. Exactly. Yeah, no, Brian Burns is going to be a stud for us.
Yeah.
But people are saying, well, Daniel Jones missed this throw because Brian Burns was going to sack him. But I have to remind these people, yes, that's true. But Daniel Jones has a red jersey on, and he's not going to get hit. So, and Brian Burns had already veered off, and maybe Daniel Jones's clock was a little bit accelerated. But the way Jones threw that football, man, it was like a dart, and he had to put a little bit more touch on it because Wan'Dale, and I wish I knew how he got open. He was wide open. We're talking like 15 yards of separation, and it wasn't even like a slight overthrow. Like that probably would have been an overthrow for Bryce Ford Wheaton, possibly, right? Like it was like a good 3-4 yards over Wan'Dale's head.
The receiver. I mean, he just yipped. I think he just got the yips, honestly.
Yeah, And that happens, Dan. And that happens.
I will say this, though. I feel like this is not the first time we've seen him throw a deep ball with that trajectory, that dark trajectory when it needs to be more of an arc. The Darius Slayton one from a few years ago against the Steelers or against the Redskins. Yes, Slayton should have caught that, but it's an unnecessary dart. Slayton's wide open. Just put some air under that, put some arc, and let the receiver run under that.
Which we see sometimes too. Again, it's in the wheelhouse. It's just
in the wheelhouse again. You're right. It's not like he doesn't have moments of the Nabers, though, has a moment of the arc that we want. But like, figure it out to how to do this more consistently as a thrower.
It's just doesn't want to show up. You know, it's there, but doesn't want to show.
The best golfers are the ones with a consistent swing. I'm bringing it back to golf again, Nick. Not the ones who have a different swing every time. We gotta get this thing down.
Yeah. So that was an ugly miss. It doesn't look good on Twitter. You know, it doesn't reflect well of Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones was inconsistent in this practice, but I don't think he was as terrible as that throw would indicate.
Yeah, the Nabers moment. Yeah, it was great.
Exactly. So he also had a miss on a deep out route to Daniel Bellinger. And I'm like 90% sure it was Jones that threw that because I had it marked down, but it was a little bit hard because like things were going quick. This was one of the last team periods of the practice. And Daniel Bellinger just might have been a flag route, might have been a corner route, but he ran on a deep corner and Bellinger kind of had to stop and like twist around because his momentum was going towards the sideline. He had to kind of stop, and it didn't look like it was supposed to be designed like a flag sit type of situation. So I think the ball was supposed to hit him in stride, and he was run up the sidelines like we saw, I think, even a little bit later on in that drive with Daniel Bellinger. But yeah, Jones just threw it a little bit too far to the inside, a little high, and it was just kind of an ugly looking pass for that specific route ran by Daniel Bellinger.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to get your take on all. So those are the 4 explosive plays?
Yes, from Daniel Jones. We had a couple from Drew Lock, and Tommy DeVito had a few too.
I know. I heard Tommy had some good throws. Right now, I'm going to focus on Jones for the explosives. I want to talk about that first team offense just to start there because there's other stuff I want to get to in practice that's probably going to be ahead of that. But that's the obvious. Look, we got to get we went over it. We just got to get more consistent with these explosive opportunities. We got instead of 1 of 4, these need to be 2 of 4 or 3 of 4 in practice, to be honest.
And if we want to spin it positively, we can, right? Because there were struggles on those deep throws, but during the 2-minute drill, which I believe was the second to last team period, Daniel Jones 3 plays touchdown.
Yeah,
and it was the Malik Nabers 40-yard bomb, and then there was like a 15-yard, maybe even 20-yard pass to the pylon that hit Jalen Hyatt on a back shoulder. It was a beautiful throw, showed rapport between Jalen Hyatt and Daniel Jones, got the Giants down to the 1-yard line. And then the Giants ran the play that they've run so many times whenever they get a light box. Quarterback is in the shotgun, tight end being Chris Manhertz, by the way. He's aligned way outside. Devin Singletary ends up running the fast 3 towards Chris Manhertz and whoever the other receiver was. And then defender leaves the box. Daniel Jones catches it. Quarterback draw right into the end zone. So we've seen that play a lot over the last 2 years. I also love that they're willing to run that play with Daniel Jones. Obviously, like the confidence there is good. 3 practices in a row, this guy has played like a full complement of snaps. So that's a great development. But it did show some resilience. Yeah, it did show some resilience. You know, Daniel Jones was able to lead the team to a touchdown in 2-minute drill against the first team defense.
It's the moments like that. I mean, he has his moments. We all know that. Anyone who guys can see that he has his moments. It's a great 2-minute drill by him. Just has to be more consistent. And to your point, I saw a stat from Jacob Gibbs last week. Daniel Jones has the most design rushes and the most total rushing attempts in the red zone of any quarterback over the last 2 years. That was a higher percent on a percentage basis. It was higher than Lamar. It was higher than Allen. It was higher than every quarterback in the NFL. And it's good to see that they're not going to take that away because, quite frankly, Nick, it's an advantage. There's a man advantage for the Giants in the box if they have a quarterback who can run and who you have to worry about running at all times. And that's part of his game. If you're naming him as your QB1, in my opinion, he has to remain a running quarterback. It's not, he has an ACL. Now we'll turn him into a pure pocket passer. You might as well cut him at that point. You have to keep this part of his game a part of his game. And don't worry about the injury. Just let him go.
We discussed that way back. Like, I don't even know. It's probably during the 2023 season when we were discussing Daniel Jones being the quarterback of the future moving forward. We're like, he has to still be mobile. So it's great to see that, at least in training camp, they're not shy to use him in that manner. Now, there were 2 turnovers, the Dane Belton interception to conclude practice that I discussed. And that was just a great play by Dane Belton. You see him. It seemed like man coverage. Belton, I'm sorry?
He bait him?
A little bit. It seemed like it was man coverage from my end because this was on the far end of the field. and somebody was covering, it might have been a wheel or it might have been a 9 route up the sideline, and Daniel probably just didn't put enough on it, and Belton was the underneath defender. And you know how the Giants sometimes when in the red zone, at least with Wink Martindale and with Patrick Graham, a lot of teams do this. They run man coverage and then 2 buzz, basically. So the 2 safeties, they buzz down, they play basically zone, they watch the quarterback's intentions, they feel out the routes, and they just kind of use their football IQ, their football acumen to make plays, as Dane Belton did here. And there was man coverage across the board outside of that. Dane Belton did that with Daniel Jones. He sunk down, and you see him, he was kind of like in an overhang position to begin with, and he just starts striding laterally to the outside, eyes on Jones. And then once Jones, I guess, gave some kind of cue, Belton flipped his hips and then just jumped up, high pointed the football for a pick, because it was a little bit underthrown to whoever Jones was targeting. But he did that at Iowa. He did that at Iowa so much in his junior.
His limited opportunities in the NFL. He's been a right guy in the right place, a high football IQ guy who knows where to be. And look, I talked a while ago to you, Nick, about how I felt like on tape McKinney, when he was with Patrick Graham, flash moments of just high IQ of understanding angles on a football field as a safety. I think Belton's got a little bit in that in him as well, just understanding the angles toward the football. And you see it show up. And I wonder, man, because look, obviously it wasn't like a huge role with Wink Martindale for him in his first couple of years. Was it 1 year or 2 years for Belton? I don't know.
2 years.
2 years, yeah. But year 3 in a new system that kind of better fits his skill set, let's be honest.
It does.
It could happen for him. This is going to better. This system clearly is best for Dane Belton. So I'm excited about him. I got excited about him last offseason, so I don't want to get too excited again just yet, Nick. We do this a lot, but like he's one of my sleepers. Once we do our sleepers, breakouts, bust, he's a sleeper for me. I'll just reveal that right now.
Shane Bowen's defense focuses a lot on using your eyes to read the releases of the receivers and then reacting. And that plays so much more into Dane Belton's favor than Wink Martindale's system. Now, the thing is, can Dane Belton be consistent as a run defender? And that still, I think, remains to be determined. But if he can, then you have a pretty underrated, I would say, safety room with him, Pinnock, and Newman, who, like I said earlier, did not practice. But I am glad Belton's getting these reps, man, and making the play. The other turnover, though, was a strip sack. I'm not 100% sure who made contact on it, because Dexter Lawrence blocked my view by taking out Morrissey, who was playing center for John Michael Schmitz, because John Michael Schmitz did not receive a full complement of snaps. He ran a stunt. So he takes Morrissey right into Aaron Stinney, and Aaron Stinney just goes flying on the ground. And I'm like, oh, crap. And then I see Jones just like fumbling for a football and trying to get it. So I'm not certain if Nacho on the other end got a hand of it or Kayvon did, because Kayvon came screaming around the edge. He might have got it from the backside. A little bit unclear from my vantage point what exactly happened. But all I know is Dexter Lawrence took Morrissey and Aaron Stinney for a freaking ride, dude. Like, God bless this offensive line who have to go up against Dexter Lawrence every day. This guy is truly something special here in New York. And I just hope that like the Giants can get good enough so everyone in the NFL can finally acknowledge how damn just talented Dexter Lawrence is as an athlete and as a football player.
I'm with you on that. I still feel like he's wildly underrated. I want to get into 2 players you touched on. We're going to go a little deeper here now. We'll circle back to first team stuff if we have it, but I want to get on 2 players you touched on in your intro breakdown. And those players are going to be Ryder Anderson and wait, why am I blanking on the second player that you got a little? Oh, Turbo and Turbo. Okay, so we're going to get into Turbo and Ryder Anderson. But before I do that, I want to touch a little bit on Tommy DeVito. I had heard from somebody who was at practice. I want to get your take on this. This is a Dan hearing people that are watching practice from the stands, and how did it compare to what Nick saw as a credentialed beat reporter? They're not going to call you beat reporter, credentialed analyst in the New York Football Times. I had heard that Tommy DeVito, because we talked about you talked about on those explosive throws, those intermediate ones, intermediate to deep. We saw some struggles from Jones today, 1 of 4 on those opportunities. I had heard that Tommy DeVito had really been doing a really good job in this practice of hitting his intermediate throws. Did you see anything like that? Did you get that same feel?
So he had a nice deep horizontal cross in stride to Lawrence Cager, a player we should probably talk about a little bit later. But then he also had I would say it was I don't want to say it was a bad miss, but he had a miss up the sideline to Bryce Ford Wheaton, who had a little bit of vertical leverage, and Tommy DeVito underthrew it and then put it too wide to the outside, to where Bryce Ford Wheaton adjusted over his outside shoulder and fell out of bounds before he was able to really secure the pass. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Tommy DeVito was good or crisp on his deep. I don't really think any of the quarterbacks were all that impressive. The most impressive throw was by far and away the Daniel Jones 40-yard pass. Drew Lock also had
a route that DeVito hit, or was that Lock? A wheel route? I thought I saw
the wheel route was Drew Lock. Yeah, Drew Lock connected with Turbo, who we were just discussing. Dante Turbo Miller, who the Giants, an undrafted kid from South Carolina from 2 years ago, and also one of the Ivy League schools. I believe it was Columbia, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Columbia.
He got isolated against Darius Muasau because he's a running back, and the running back against a linebacker, and Miller just turboed past him, and Lock had just all the time in the world to deliver the football to him. That was a good throw, but it was wide open. So by far and away, the best throw was the Jones one. I don't think there was one that like Tommy DeVito made that was like, oh, that's great. Like that wasn't necessarily my impression.
So let's get into Dante Turbo Miller. I look at this depth chart, Nick, and I think of all the positions on this depth chart from a skill position standpoint, it's a lock. But of all the positions, a case can be made that running back is the one with the most ground to be gained if you're trying to move up a depth chart right now. There's Devin Singletary who's going to get a whole lot of snaps this year. We know that. But there's a number and there's a cap in my mind to Devin Singletary's snap percentage. And that goes based on his collegiate career, his career with the Bills, and his career with the Texans. There's a cap on the snap percentage he's going to get. So snaps are to be had. There's assumptions that it'll be Eric Gray, Tyrone Tracy. But why? Like, there's a chance that this guy, Turbo Miller, if he is what he's supposed to be, and he adds that different level of speed element and explosive element to the offense, he can earn snaps easily. We saw Matt Breida earn a really big role with that kind of explosive skill set, I'll call it, even if he wasn't as explosive in his later years as he was during those early days of the Niners. He was clocking like 25 miles per hour in that Shanahan system. But what are your thoughts on Turbo Miller? Is there a possibility he can move up this depth chart all the way to make a case to be in the mix for RB2 type duties?
Yeah, I would say so. Now, will that happen? It's probably unlikely. RB2, you have Eric Gray, you have Tyrone Tracy. There's a lot of hype around Tyrone Tracy, I believe rightfully so. So it's going to take a lot. I think he'd have to prove himself on special teams. But he has a unique trait, and that's just an extra gear that I don't think any of the running backs have. And look at the New York Giants. Since 2018, they had a running back with a certain skill set. You could argue it's declined, and I would be right there with you, but he had an extra gear to him. Now, obviously, Dante Miller is not Saquon Barkley, but you want to diversify the skill sets within your running back room now that you're going to be diversifying all the snaps amongst 3 or 4 running backs. Miller has an ability similar, now he's not this player, but he has an ability similar to Keaton Mitchell of the Baltimore Ravens. If you want to use him on a slip screen and you get the football to him and there's like one block, Andrew Thomas makes a block and he gets a little bit of leverage against a defender, he's gone. You know, he has that type of extra gear, that type of acceleration, that type of burst. Tyrone Tracy has burst, not that type of burst. I would say Eric Gray is good in a phone booth, not necessarily the fastest guy. And I think Devin Singletary is just a very savvy, nuanced running back, but he doesn't have that burst either. So there is a path to the roster. I just think it's going to be tight, man. And making plays like he did today, he had another touchdown. It might have been from Tommy DeVito a little bit earlier in practice as well. And a bunch of people celebrated. I think Jones also in the initial, I just wanted to bring this up because I saw it on my notes. In the initial phase, the initial team period had a touchdown to Malik Nabers on a dig route. So I wanted to mention next that it wasn't an explosive play, but still very important. And the sidelines ended up going crazy. But yeah, so circle back to your question. Yeah, I think there is a path, especially if injuries befall the Giants. But you have to prove yourself other than just being, I think, an elite explosive weapon in other areas of this roster, which is going to be special teams.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he makes the roster. But if he does, I think he's going to have a role in the offense because the best coaches, in my mind at least, are the ones who find different roles for multiple backs within their system. And I've seen that with Kyle Shanahan, with Matt LaFleur. I've seen that with some of the better offensive minds in the NFL. I know Brian Dable can be that guy too because he was that guy in Buffalo. He wasn't that guy ever yet here because he had a Saquon Barkley. He doesn't have a Saquon Barkley anymore. So now it's time to find unique roles for the talent that you have on the roster. All these guys can do different things. Turbo Miller giving that extra juice. Let's get to Ryder Anderson a little bit because there's another opportunity there in my mind. We've talked about it all offseason. I don't want to call it glaring hole because I honestly do believe that if your defensive line features Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and Brian Burns, I'm not all that concerned who the fourth guy is at all times. Sure, it's good to have another thing. Never bad to have more. But that role is still a role that will get snaps. And it's going to be a rotation. But will Ryder Anderson factor into that rotation? Because he looked a lot different going into this camp. And I don't know if you got to see Jordan Riley today or any thoughts on him.
Oh, yo, I do actually.
in the pictures I saw of him. Like, he looked like he cut all his weight and just got jacked up. Like, the physique that I thought him, again, the physique Twitter here, or physique analysis here, but like, the dude looked like he's ready to be an elite football player. That doesn't mean he's gonna be. From down, I thought so much more about football, but from the body standpoint, I feel like he got himself in a position. So I wanted to hear a little bit about those two D linemen.
Ryder Anderson's working with the first team. Now, I don't have specific notes. I didn't really hone in on the defensive line, like the interior parts of the defensive line against the offensive lineman. From where I was, it's very difficult to discern exactly what is going on there. So I take videos and I try to rewatch them. So there wasn't like a specific play where he stood out, but he's working with the first team. His body type, his skill set is different than a lot of the other Giants. So it makes sense that the Giants are exploring him as a first team option. And that's definitely a positive step in his quest to make this roster. Now, the Jordan Riley thing is impressive. So before practice started, before the team periods, when they were just doing individual drills, Ed and I walked to where the defensive linemen were, because initially we were just kind of monitoring the defensive backs. It was closer to where we exited from the building, from where Brian Dable spoke. I've never seen bigger calves on a human being than Jordan Riley. It looks like someone took a softball and just shoved it inside of someone's leg. It's gigantic. You know how in Halloween, you have those jack-o'-lanterns, you have pumpkins that everyone goes and gets. And then there's those like smaller pumpkins that are still pretty damn large. Those were Jordan Riley's calves. They were huge, bro.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about, and that's insane.
DJ Davidson too. Ed and I, when we were walking up to hear Brian Dable talk, DJ Davidson came out of the locker room and walked like right in front of us. And it was one of those like walks in front of us where it was like, if Ed and I were just a little bit quicker, he might have just ran us over, you know, like he had a lot of authority in how he was walking, and it was like no eye contact with us. He looked very dialed in and determined. And I was like, good for DJ Davidson. He's another very big individual.
There you go. There you go. So I got some D line covered. I'm trying to think of just remembering through what I read through your report, Nick, what I've missed or what we might have missed and what we haven't touched on that we want to get to.
Yeah. So there's a few things I'd like to touch on a little bit.
Stuff.
Yeah. So it's been a little bit odd, right? Daniel Bellinger started team periods with the third team. And I was like, very odd, because Chris Manhertz and Lawrence Cager, they were getting a lot of those first team reps. And I was like, I really hope that's not a referendum on our guy, you know, because that would be terrible. And me personally, I really respect Daniel Bellinger's game. But then eventually, as we've spoken throughout this entire podcast, Daniel Bellinger ended up working in with the first team, got a bunch of targets, but it was at least a tip to me, because Jack Stoll, he is somebody who is slowly, him and Micah McFadden are slowly getting it into the lineup. And Brian Dable acknowledged that before practice, but it was a tip to me. Now, this Lawrence Cager thing is not fake. They love Lawrence Cager, and Lawrence Cager, I think he's like not a shoo-in to make the team, because no one is probably at the tight end position. I would say Bellinger is, because he doesn't cost that much.
Consideration.
But Lawrence Cager is a real thing. And if I had my money on it, him, Bellinger, and Manhertz are the three tight ends. And if they want to keep a fourth, it'll be Jack Stoll. But the slow start to camp is significantly going to hurt Stoll with the reality that Lawrence Cager is rising so much. Manhertz is earning a lot of first team snaps.
Also, Theo Johnson, we didn't mention him.
And Theo Johnson, but he's on the pup right now.
But that's a guaranteed roster spot, though.
Exactly. Yeah, no, 100%.
But didn't we hear today that he's playing soon?
It looked like it. Now, Dable has said multiple times
that he'll be back Sunday, I think.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear that part. I mean, he might have said it. I might have been like taking notes or something, but he's not worried about Theo Johnson or really anybody at this point, other than, I mean, he hasn't expressed worry about Evan Neal. I didn't see Evan Neal today.
Did we get anything about Neal or no today?
No, I didn't see him out there either.
Wasn't out there and we get nothing. They didn't ask Dable or no?
No, I mean, they talked a lot about him yesterday. So
okay.
I'll say this though, man, Jermaine Illuminor, like we were talking about, oh man, when's Jermaine Illuminor? He might be back Sunday. He was back out there taking first team reps. He didn't play all of them, but he was back out there.
You can't get a glimpse of Evan Neal, but Illuminor's back there one day later after this injury. I mean, come on.
Dude,
it was together, Evan Neal.
And it was funny, man, because John Runyon, and he wasn't like throwing anybody under the bus, but when he was talking to the media, he mentioned something to the effect of like, yeah, Jermaine's, favorite position or best position or natural position, whatever he said, it might have been natural, is right tackle. And I'm thinking like Jermaine Illuminor, I don't think he's ever missed a training camp practice. I'm pretty sure he's said that in one of the interviews that I've watched. So this guy is really dialed in, but like he has a chance to be the starting right tackle now. If that is his natural position, like this could be something that I know we discussed it on yesterday's podcast. Could be something that, might happen, dude. You start reading the tea leaves.
Right.
And you're just like, oh, why'd they move him? How serious is Evan Neal's injury? What's going on with this? Oh, it's his natural position. Right. Oh, he's going to get comfortable there. Are they really going to switch it back? There's just a lot of little questions there. And where does that leave Evan Neal?
Well, that's a great point. I mean, maybe they'll start cross-training him at guard and let him be the swing tackle for now. But, one of the two. But it's not like out of the realm of possibilities because, remember, they gave Illuminor. We saw this on Hard Knocks. They didn't cave, but they sweetened the pot to get Illuminor here. They remember the whole discussion with the agent. The agent needs this. Okay, we'll give him that. Give him that right away, and let's get him signed. And the contract that the Giants gave Illuminor is pretty legitimate. It's a legitimate contract for a starting offensive lineman. And they feel like, and I know this for a fact, the Giants feel like they're buying on the up because you remember from Hard Knocks, the Giants said, no, the agent, he just wants a 2-year deal. Like the Giants wanted to go 3-4 and like lock this in before in their mind, he hits what they think he can hit. Carm Brasil has obviously played a role in this, being like, this guy has room to grow. He's just going to get better and better. So I know the Giants feel like they're buying him on the up. It's a 2-year deal that the agent and him agreed on because they want to get another chance at a contract. But all that tells me, Nick, is that they believe in his talent, and there may be a case to be made right now. Honestly, not there may be. There is a case to be made right now. It's probably the right case that the higher floor is going with Illuminor as your right tackle, based on what we've seen from Evan Neal. Because we already know from what we've seen from Evan Neal, and yes, injuries have played a role, but from what we've seen from Evan Neal, that floor is considerably lower, probably, than Jermaine Illuminor's floor. I still think Neal has the higher ceiling, but floor is a big thing these days on the offensive line. Every offensive line coach is talking about it. Get me a floor. So that might be the move the Giants go with, to go with the floor play.
And if you're the New York Giants, you haven't had a good offensive line for how long? It dates back to like the last time they won a Super Bowl, it seems like. What would you bet on? A high ceiling when you've been roofless for so long, or a good floor? Because all you need is a consistent offensive line who's going to protect your quarterback and allow your offense to operate and not kill you and give up like a 1st and 10 sack, just absolutely demolishing a drive. So now, it makes sense from that standpoint.
It does make sense from that standpoint, but I also think, and this goes back to the conversation we had yesterday or the day before, I think the Giants are going to get to a point where they feel confident. Like, this dude's pretty natural at right tackle. We can probably just afford to go to Evan Neal with a little handshake agreement behind the scenes with Illuminor. Like, dude, we're going to give Neal these reps. He's going to be our RT1 like it was supposed to be, and we'll see what happens in week 1, but we're going to have a quick leash. And you may be right back at right tackle. It may be 1 game. It may be 2 games. If this dude is still playing like he's played in his Giants career, and by this dude, I mean Evan Neal, we're pulling the plug week 1 or week 2 or week 3. You're now the starting right tackle. And we trust that you could just move over there, and it's fine. And then the question is, do they put in Stinney or Neal? Because at that point, that's the only problem with this plan. At that point, you haven't cross-trained Neal at guard. He's only gotten these reps at tackle. Do you want to just throw him in at guard, or do you want to put Stinney there? Because I just got to say, Nick, like, I still think the combo of O-linemen, whether it be Neal at guard or Neal at tackle, I don't want Stinney in there, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think he's probably capable and fine, but I'm not sold on that. I think there's a chance he could be Bredesen level. I think he'd be worse than Bredesen level. And that's, we're getting into the range of what we've been getting in 2022, 2023. I don't want to go back down to that range. I want to go a little higher than that. So I do think that they got to make a decision on Neal. Do they want to start cross-training him at guard? And that's going to be a big thing for them this offseason. Yeah,
first he's got to get healthy. So we're even at that point, right? Like
we're going too far ahead of the picture right now with this dude.
No, I know.
Right. You're right. You're 100% right. Before even talking about we're going to cross-train him at guard. Get him on the field. This guy's got to get on the field. So you're right.
Get him on the field. Get him fully rehabbed. Hopefully the Giants can get something out of that top 10 selection. At this point, man. Yeah, we got to get the best 5 out there. There's a few other things I wanted to acknowledge. One was John Runyon. After practice, talking to the media on the podium, someone mentioned kicking over to left guard, and he seemed pretty like hell-bent on no, right? He was like, hey, I'm playing right guard now. It's what I'm focused on. I have position versatility, in an emergency, I can even play center. He talked about how he's played center in the preseason, but like basically like he wants to be right guard. And that's just like, I'm sure if the Giants went to him and said, hey, can you play left guard? He would say, of course, you're paying my bills. But it does seem like we've seen guards rotate in the past. Like with Runyon, he might just be that guy on the right side. And I'm okay with that if that's what he is most comfortable with.
Me too. The key is let's get our offensive linemen feeling comfortable about where they're playing, where they're at. And we need to maximize these players. And then that's the coach's job. We got to figure out how to do that. But I'm with you on that one entirely.
We got some Josh Azudu first team reps at both tackle spots when Andrew Thomas was taking a rest. That was noteworthy just because we've been talking a lot about Azudu, and the Giants are really trying to like make that a thing. Like the tackle, it seems like they're really focusing on him there.
Yeah. How'd it go?
I didn't pay attention to those reps per se with Josh Azudu. I know yesterday he gave up a sack to Kayvon Thibodeau. I could see maybe in my
that's the thing, by the way. I've been to camp. It's hard to see. It's hard to get everything down. Yeah. You've got one set of eyes for one play, and you better figure out one thing to focus on because you're not going to get it all.
And from the vantage point that we had, the defense was in the way, so it's hard to see like the numbers. Like it's very hard to recognize who the offensive linemen on the interior are because there's just so many guys in between us and them, the defensive guys. And I don't know if you guys know number 97 for the New York Giants. He's freaking big. All right. It's hard to see, but Jimmy Morrissey was the backup center, and he took first team reps and not Austin Schlottman, which is different than I believe what we saw the previous 2 days. Could just be just a feel out process. Sometimes it seems like, at least historically, thinking back on covering training camp from afar, some of these players would receive first team reps, and it's not necessarily because they're the best, but they just the coaching staff just wants to see if they can handle first team reps. And if they don't, that's kind of like a telltale sign, like this guy's not going to make the team. He did not do well. So it could be that. So I'm a little unsure exactly, but I just wanted to bring that up. Nick McLeod was working in individual.
Boy, Nick McLeod.
Yes, he was working in
Nick, real quick. Besides McLeod, let's pull him out there. Nick McLeod, Daniel Bellinger. Who are the other guys that we feel like we've been higher on based on the film?
That's good.
Yeah, first, and then question for another time, maybe.
But it probably is. It could be its own podcast, possibly.
Yeah.
Well,
we'll come back to that one. But this is another. I mean, this guy like gets on the field and he makes plays. He gets in practice and he makes plays. Yeah.
I'm not certain if he made like a big play in this, but I was just paying attention to the EDDs, everyday drills with the position groups. Like Shane Bowen was with, I mentioned before how I was closer to the defensive backs, the safeties and the cornerbacks. And I saw Nick McLeod teaching Isaiah Simmons, who was working with the defensive backs, press, jam, and he was doing a bunch of different things. And he seemed like he was like coaching Isaiah Simmons up. And Ed and I looked at each other. We're like, yeah, look at Nick McLeod, man. And Isaiah Simmons just looks much different than any other defensive back on this team, other than maybe Jason Pinnock. Jason Pinnock is he's an impressively built human being. He really is. But yeah, so Nick McLeod seemed like he was really helping Isaiah Simmons into this transition to be a professional nickel apex overhang defender like he did in college, as we brought up yesterday. So I felt like that was cool. And in the individual drills too, saw a lot of like spacing and leverage. Everything was kind of half speed. It wasn't full speed, but it was just two receivers are going to run routes. You're the safety. The route combination is dagger, or the route combination is a post and a flag or something. How do you react? So basically you can discern that these are drills oriented to teams that run split field to read coverages, which is exactly what Shane Bowen is going to do. So a lot of that just ends up becoming man coverage once those routes are declared, but it's just like little things like that I appreciate seeing. It's not exciting or anything, right? It's just half speed guys running, but you could see the safety reading and then positioning himself, understanding the space, understanding the route, and then reacting based on that. And then with the cornerbacks, it was more so leverage pre-snap based on the offense's alignment, and then basically mid-pointing, which we've explained before. If you're a cornerback who is mid-pointing, you're splitting the difference to the field side of the number one and the number two, and you're reacting. You want to force, if you're going to throw to the number one, which is the outside guy, you want to force that throw to be high and over the top, but you also want to keep a relationship with the number two receiver to the point where you can click and close or break really quickly to get through the catch point. So they were just running quick and easy drills like that to really understand leverage and space in the secondary. And Shane Bowen was with the secondary the entire practice with individual drills. So he wasn't with the defensive line for that portion of practice.
And I love that mention to Nick McLeod with Isaiah Simmons, because sometimes this gets overlooked, I think, in team building and roster building, the presence and the influence of an experienced veteran. For example, Allen Robinson, a player who used to be one of the best receivers in the NFL. If we're going to be completely honest, it's not his fault that he had Blake Bortles and all those trash quarterbacks for most of his career. He's not the player he was anymore, obviously, but he still has everything in his mind and in his football process and his IQ that he always had. And he talked a lot about after practice. I saw this quote. He's like, yeah, I'll tell you what, I think Wan'Dale, Hyatt, and Nabers are going to be good receivers in the NFL. I'll tell you the reason why. It's because how detail-oriented they are. And that's a lot of what Allen Robinson was. He was very detail-oriented in his release package, in his route running, in the way he positioned himself to the football. And he's already seeing that after a few days of training camp practice with these dudes that I am very high on as well, Hyatt, Robinson, and Nabers. I really think the Giants, we may never see it, or we may not see it until we get better quarterback play. And I'm sorry to say that for those who disagree. And I'll throw in offensive line play because that's a given. We need better offensive line and quarterback play. But if we get that ever, like if we had what the Chiefs had and what all these great teams passing that, I'm totally at the point where I think we could have a sick passing game with those three receivers. I find them all to be weapons. Hyatt, Nabers, and Wan'Dale Robinson. And it's evidenced by the film. It's evidenced by plays like today when Wan'Dale's 15 yards wide open running down the field.
So I was right next to Allen Robinson when that conversation was taking place. And yeah, and he said Hyatt and Wan'Dale and Nabers they talked about before. He said Nabers, the sky is the limit. There is just there's no ceiling for Malik Nabers because he is just that talented. Yeah. That's what he said. And he said he has it dialed on straight. Right now, though, he's just learning the playbook. This is only his third practice. Praised the capabilities and the potential of Malik Nabers. And then someone asked him about Jalen Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson. And he said, when you combine detail-oriented players with talent, which both of those players possess, that is something that not every wide receiver room has. Basically, what he was saying is these players really care. They really care. They come in. A
lot of wide receiver rooms. He knows the difference.
Exactly. And I know that sounds like a bunch of bullshit speak, but I think it's real. I do. When it comes to Jalen Hyatt, I heard Dable, I think, mention this in the pre-practice press conference. And then when Hyatt was discussing things with the media, he said, Mike Groh has done wonders for me. Mike Groh has taken so much time out of his personal schedule off the clock to help me out and to work with me on certain areas of the game that I'm trying to expand. So that says two things, right? Well, it says a lot of things, but two things I want to focus on. It says Mike Groh, that is a damn good coach, right? You're going above and beyond for your young players. And Jalen Hyatt, you don't need to do that, right? That's not in your contract to do. That's a player who wants to be great, doing everything in his power to be great and being assisted by his coach. And I absolutely love to see that. So Allen Robinson understood all this. Allen Robinson is taking his knowledge and experience and applying it to the film room as well to help these young receivers. I look at Allen Robinson. It's like, what can he do still? He said when we were all discussing or talking with him, he still has football left in his tank. He's embracing the veteran leadership role. And I'm thinking about this wide receiver room, not a lot of veterans. He could be like an outside chance that none of us are really discussing, you know?
Because it could be valuable to them to have him on the roster, being that veteran presence throughout a season too. When there's ups and downs of a season or just different moments where you might need him. So I think that's a good call. And we'll watch that throughout camp and we'll see.
He's still young too.
Still not that old. Yeah. And like he hasn't had good quarterback play in a while, including last year. He was with the Trubisky disaster and, you know, everything that's going on in Pittsburgh.
Dude, Robinson's only 30. Yeah. He's been in the league for,
it feels like,
I think 10 years. I think he was drafted in 2014.
Yeah. It's been, he entered the NFL young and broke out at a young age too, early breakout age. He's the type of receiver that could play late into his career. We'll see what happens with him. But either way, I'm happy he's here now. All right.
Yeah, just to help them for sure.
Yeah, exactly. All right. That was in what I would consider to be, Nick, from my vantage point, and we'll let the listeners decide, the best podcast we've had since April. I really felt like that was the best podcast we had since April, since draft season. Phenomenal stuff. Getting that inside look from you, all that detail from training camp. It's irreplaceable to me. Invaluable and at another level from, to be quite frank, the training camp coverage we get when it's just me and you here behind the scenes, watching stuff and reading stuff. So I don't know what your plan is, but I hope that you're there for more training camp practices and we can get this more often.
I'll be there Monday, but I have work at my real big boy job, and that's a nighttime thing. So I don't know if we're going to be able to get a podcast out after Monday's practice, but we'll try.
But either way, you're going to have the information, which is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'll have the article and everything.
All right. So we are going to get this more often. So for those of you who enjoyed that hour, longer than we usually go for these deep dive, I'm excited. That was fun. That was a great podcast. I had a great time. Don't usually do these podcast wraps ups on the show, but I felt like it was well worth it today. Nick, thank you, buddy. That was fun. Glad to learn what I learned today. And for Giants fans everywhere, let's get this thing rolling, baby. We're developing these plays, these explosives. We just got to start hitting them. And definitely some good signs in the development of the players that you broke down, though. And I'm excited about some of these back-end guys making the move up the roster. For everyone else, please, if you enjoyed this show, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet and you're on YouTube, you're watching for the first time, just hit that like button right now. First of all, if you're subscribed already, please hit that like button and then subscribe. We're over 7K. We need to get this number higher. I mean,
yeah, for real.
Putting out content that deserves to be higher. I'm just going to be blunt about that as well. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or anything else, and you haven't already, please download, please rate, please review on iTunes. Let's get that over 1,000. Help support the show. And the more support we get, the more content we can do. It's always been as simple as that. Thank you so much, though, for those of you who continue to support us. I promised a little while ago, Nick, we're going to do a mailbag, so I want to do that next week. So let's lock that in at some point, a mid-training camp mailbag. But we'll figure that out as it comes. And we got a good guest coming on soon, too, in about a week or two that I'm very excited about. Other than that, little teasers there. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your weekend.